Hey, welcome to Lab, the podcast. Grateful to be here with my friend and conservatory poet, Wendy Kieffer. It's so good to be back. I say it every time. This is one of my favorite spaces. And we just spent time a few minutes ago talking about just the art education piece. And I think last time we were together, starting an episode with that kind of conversation about why poetry matters.
Mhm.
And so before we even dive in, I want to just say thank you for just doing the work of being a poet, if that makes sense. It's a doing and a being part. But these are life-giving conversations to me. And I think for everybody listening, just a regular cadence of poetry is good. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure, truly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The big dream is that we can see more of that. And
Mm.
again, in a world that is disenchanted and is fragmented and feels at times so like it's just evacuated of meaning,
Right.
poetry comes back into that. And again, Robert Frost, it has a way of helping us remember what it would impoverish us to forget.
Mm.
And so we're going to do that again with a poem that looks back to Easter in a way and is a look back. But this poem comes out of a moment in American history
Mhm.
that maybe is familiar to some people, maybe not. But I always love these conversations, not just for the poetry, but the education side. So this is a Harlem Renaissance poet and poem.
Mhm.
Give some context around that period of time and just kind of locate us in the context so that we can know a
Yeah.
little bit about the poet and the poem.
Sure. So we're doing The Easter Flower by Claude McKay. He was late 19th century, early 20th. And so he was coming up and a young man around the time of the Harlem Renaissance, which was the 20s and 30s. It was this big cultural revival in the African American community, just a renewed sense of racial pride. And there was so much creativity, literature, art, music, plays, theater. And so he was really a social activist in that time. A lot of his poems, his famous poems, are centered around those themes. The one we're doing today is a little bit of a departure from his normal, it's a little more intimate and personal. But I loved when I discovered him. He's got a great story that he was born in Jamaica in 1889 and raised by peasant farmers. But his older brother taught him and would share literature with him. And he was this voracious reader. And he really started writing early on. And I love that story that there's just that one person that kind of pours into you and gives you this opportunity it's nascent, it's already in you. It just needs that outlet and that opportunity to come out. And so then he was a real voice during the Harlem Renaissance and writing. And this poem in particular, I feel like, is a beautiful poem about hope, rebirth, the Easter flower. It has a lot of the themes of Easter, but comes at it from a more natural angle. And I just love the contrasts that are in this poem.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to read.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I love, again, art history, understanding the cultural landscape that something springs up from,
Yeah.
but also just the person and the fact that
Hmm.
I grow up with farming parents in an agriculture context, but somebody introduces me to great literature. And so I'm
Yeah.
near the earth, I'm in words, and God takes those things and does something really beautiful with them. I think it's a great reminder to have poetry in our home
Mm.
and just the power of, again, it's not a recalibration to discard something, but as we've talked about before, God made us to see parts and wholes
Right.
and to understand the meaning of things. And
Yes.
part of what this poetry that has a theological lens, which I think this poem does, right? And we can talk about when in his life did he write this poem, but it helps us see even things of faith with a little bit of a different view, right? Instead
Hmm.
of trying to understand them in a technical way,
Right.
we're able to zoom out and see the story, which I think
Hmm.
is why it's so important to remember, like, your Bible is poetry, so
Yes.
much of it, right?
Right. Yeah, I love saying that because I think it helps to kind of go, oh yeah, wait, God cares about this, not just a couple of people who have a poetry bent, but God cares to speak poetically and beautifully and use language to its utmost to express his heart. So I think that's a good reminder. And as you said, I think it was C.S. Lewis, he said that reason is the organ of truth, Imagination is the organ of meaning.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so we need that meaning in our lives to punctuate moments in our lives. There's so many, moments throughout the year. Your daughter just had her graduation
Yeah.
party.
Yeah.
And I made sure to include a poem in my card. There are moments that a poem will really capture and say what needs to be said and kind of become a little tradition.
Yeah.
So finding those ways to incorporate them into moments is so, I think, valuable.
Yeah.
Helps to know the meaning of the thing, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If there was a poverty that we could say in the West, even in a context, and there's people who are struggling with deep poverty, even in places like Tampa,
Yeah.
and American poverty is different even than other parts of the world who have extreme famine, extreme poverty, right? But America, I would say, has an extreme poverty of the soul.
Yeah.
We do. And it's okay for us to be honest about that and say that our impoverishment is in a different way. Contrasted with other parts where there's deep physical poverty, ours
Right.
is a moral and spiritual and it's a meaning
Meaning.
poverty. We don't
Agreed.
know what it means. And so people, you may have had this experience even reading your Bible and you go, I don't know what it means is this meaningful? And I think, again, understanding that God writes poetically, he wants you to know him. And some of the things that he communicates, he's not communicating in top to bottom, left to right, intellectual
Right.
language. He's trying to introduce you and welcome you into a relationship that is charged with meaning and gives meaning to your life and my life. And this helps us see from that lens, which is great.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. Tell us a little bit about just the poet. You had said early work was more charged, maybe more political, but this seems to have a different tone. Maybe set that up and then take us into it.
Sure. So the Easter flower, it's set up, at first I thought, is this a sonnet? And I was like, no, it's more of an ode, like a psalm, kind of like a religious hymn. It follows a very close to iambic pentameter and kind of unpacks in that very song-like quality, which I think is great for this particular poem. But this one's it's a little more intimate, like I said, than some of his other more politically charged poems. This is just an intimate moment. And I think there's always that tendency when a poet is writing in first person to believe that that is actually him. And so, we can get into that a little bit as we read it. It might be because, it definitely goes on a journey in his life. It seems to mirror some of the things he might have believed. But there is always that curiosity. Is he just imagining the I? So I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we can get a little bit more into this, the meaning of this poem. But, it's really about rebirth, hope, differences and likenesses of religious beliefs versus the natural world, and really just like the power of nature and beauty and to point to the transcendental. So it's called The Easter Flower. Far from this foreign Easter damp and chilly, my soul steals to a pear-shaped plot of ground, where gleamed the lilac-tinted Easter lily, soft-scented in the air for yards around, alone without a hint of guardian leaf. Just like a fragile bell of silver rhyme, it bursts the tomb for freedom sweet and brief in the young, pregnant year at Easter time. And many thought it was a sacred sign, and some called it the resurrection flower. And I, a pagan, worshipped at its shrine, yielding my heart unto its perfumed power.
It's so beautiful even in the way that it's structured. I love how you said that, an ode and a psalm and the musicality of it. And it's beautiful. I think if I was thumbing through a collection of poetry, I would land on this because I love flowers.
Yeah.
And so anything with flowers I'm drawn to, and I love how it's perfumed power. Flowers just kind of draw you towards them.
Yes.
What was it that maybe drew you even to the page when you noticed this poem?
I think that was it too, that there is something enticing and alluring and subtly gentle about flowers and about this moment that's drawing him in, this perfumed power. It's so subtle, but it's very powerful.
Mhm.
And I think I loved the contrast because he starts off by saying, far from this foreign Easter, damp and chilly. So the damp and chilly could just be his feelings about how the tradition of Easter, how they feel to him. They feel damp or chilly. They don't feel warm. Maybe he's in a damp and chilly cathedral,
Mhm.
but for whatever reason, he's sort of on the outside looking in. This is a foreign Easter, damp and chilly. My soul steals to a pear-shaped plot of ground.
Mm.
So beyond your traditions, now I'm just going to nature. I'm going to the earth, the ground. And here, even the plot of ground sounds like some kind of burial, right?
Mhm.
So this is the beauty and the magic of the poem, is that even though he's calling Easter foreign and out there, there's so much about this ode,
Mm.
about this flower that actually completely resembles the Easter story. And so his soul is stealing to a plot of ground where gleamed this lilac-tinted Easter lily. So we've got this very special Easter lily. And so he's saying, far from Easter, I'm actually focusing on the Easter lily,
Mm.
right? I'm going out of the tradition and I'm going into something simple and natural that is alluring in its perfumed power. It's soft-scented in the air for yards around, so it's not heavy-handed. It's not even, it doesn't even have hard edges. Excuse me, many people think maybe these religious traditions have these sort of hard angles, or they have so many rules, or whatever he's feeling that foreign Easter. In this situation, it is soft-scented, alluring, subtle, gentle. And the flower, it's soft-scented in the air for yards around, and it's alone, without a hint of guardian leaf. So again, who else is alone? This definitely harkens to, again, the Easter story, that Christ was hanging alone, that he was put in the tomb alone. Just like a fragile bell of silver rime. Rime is, R-I-M-E, is that little bit of frost that can linger on something, giving it that, the glimmer. So he's saying it's like a fragile bell of silver rime. And that bell is calling, right? A bell is ringing, it's sounding, it's getting your attention on some level. It's a fragile bell of silver rime. It burst the tomb for freedom, sweet and brief. So again, it burst out of that plot of ground. It burst the tomb. It's just like Christ. So is he far from that Easter, damp and chilly? Is he far? Even though he feels far, he feels like an outsider, he's connecting to so many of these very universal ideas of hope and rebirth. He says, it burst the tomb for freedom, sweet and brief, in the young pregnant year at Easter time. So that pregnant year is just full of possibilities. It's full of new life. It's full of something that is being brought forth. And I love this here, the way he gets to the end, because I think it just summarizes the whole poem beautifully. And many thought it was a sacred sign, and some called it the resurrection flower. And here he says, but I, a pagan, worshipped at its shrine, yielding my heart unto its perfumed power. This is universal. So he's saying these people who are close to the traditional Easter are calling it a sacred sign. I'm worshiping at its shrine. We're all being drawn into this longing, this universal longing, the hunger, the reaction to the beauty. We're all aligned here. This is a very human thing. And whether he's not quite all the way there to recognizing maybe what that flower is pointing to for these other people who are calling it the resurrection flower and all of this, he's still noticing it burst forth from the tomb. It's containing my hope, and it has something alluring that's drawing me to it. And I'm finding myself worshiping. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So cool too, when you think about like the power of beauty to point beyond itself, right? What's it
Yeah.
pointing upstream to? If it's a penultimate thing, what's the ultimate thing? And
Right.
so here's this Easter lily
Yeah.
that some have said it's charged with sacred significance. It's
Right.
meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see a lily, it's a resurrection flower. There's a Christ
Right.
representation there that you see through it, right? You can look
Right.
at it and say it's beautiful, but if you look through it, you say it's a resurrection flower.
Mm-hmm.
And how many, I'm just listening to you describe this and thinking about how many people think that feel like outsiders in the church, right? They go, I
Yep.
feel very foreign. If I go into a church, I don't know that I connect. This is a
Yep.
different language. It's a different environment.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know all of the ritual and the way that this is working together.
Right.
But here's what I do know. Outside in a plot of ground, alone, I met someone with deep compassion that drew me in. And you start to see the beauty of Jesus. And you think about people who maybe met him along the way, who would consider themselves a pagan. And they would say, like, I was an outsider. I was a
Right.
leper. I was an outcast. But I came across this resurrection flower who had a perfumed power to draw me towards them. And I, an outsider, found myself worshiping at that shrine. So this was very foreign, but this is not.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wendy Kieffer, and I am honored and overjoyed to share with you my debut poetry collection, Alchemy of Praise. I chose the word alchemy for the title because it represents transformation, and especially the kind that is magnificent or mysterious and even inexplicable. Also, alchemy represents the kind of change that is possible through poetry, taking beauty from ashes and the way it lives inside of us, transforming the way we see or perceive our world. And you'll find in this collection a variety of themes, poems on wonder and stillness, poems that exalt God and lift our eyes up, and also poems that explore the interior spaces of the soul. All of these I offer to you with love and deep gratitude. You can find your copy on Amazon. And here's to allowing poetry to do as Jana Joya said, to awaken, amplify, and refine our sense of being alive. Thanks again. Yeah, and I think a lot of people feel this way because our churches, just like our institutions and our culture, have gone away from nature.
Yeah.
We have sort of desecrated a lot of our grounds and our land.
Yeah.
And I think that, there are people who feel God's presence, they feel closer to God in a forest.
Yeah.
There's poems written about this, that the cathedral is the forest, right? And I think that it's both,
It's
right?
both, yeah.
Except that if we don't really take time to register that it's both, if we kind of stay in our zones where we go from our house to our church, to our office, to our church, to our house, we can kind of think, oh, that's where that takes place.
Yeah.
That's where Easter is.
Yeah.
And I think that it, unfortunately, maybe is a part of what makes people feel a little bit like, well, wait, I experience God over here.
Yeah.
And they think they have to make that choice, whereas it's sort of an and,
Yeah.
Yep. Right.
No, it's an absolute and I think that's what's so beautiful about realizing that. I talked to Andrew Gould, who was an Eastern Orthodox architect who built cathedrals and churches and religious spaces. And he describes when you're building or constructing a built place, that there's an element of continuity to nature, right?
Yeah.
This is God's cathedral. He built it. The heavens declare the glory of God, the mountains, everything is pointing and telling and charged with grandeur and significance. And so our built places are nested within a place that he built, right? And so he would say there's continuity to that. This story helps us tell this story.
Yes.
And then there's a sense of localness to it. So like if you're in Scotland, a church might have a certain feel or flavor as to the Northwest or the Southeast, right? And then he said there's always a tinge of the exotic, something that's otherworldly. And I think we saw this in Brno, right? Where you would very at the top of a spire, there was a hint or a glint of gold that was pointing to this is it's a threshold space.
Right.
It's something that's in the world, but not of the world, but this a place.
Crossover.
Yeah. So I think it is an and I think it's good for us to remember that because there's the beauty of having built places and churches.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there's something in the heart that's drawn to the beauty of,
Yes,
yeah,
exactly. And I think that, I mean, he ended up coming to Catholicism later in life.
yeah,
I think shortly before he died, actually. So again, if we wanted to assume that the poet's the eye, you can kind of imagine his journey along the way. But as you said, there's this cohesion between even things of the natural world and the spiritual world. There's a cohesion that, that's why Jesus is always saying these metaphors. He's always trying to
yes,
teach us, like, look at the birds, look at the flowers of the field, the lilies, look at the fig tree and the vine and the this. And he's able to do that because there are so many correlations between the spiritual and the natural.
yes,
And I think he's trying to get us to attune to that. And the more we disconnect from nature, I mean, there's so many agrarian examples in the New Covenant that you almost have to research it. Whereas before, when he was giving these teachings, it would have been obvious to everyone.
yeah,
But I think that the correlations, the interconnectedness, the relationships of all things, we can get a little, out of focus to those things when we spend a lot of time indoors and not connecting really with our natural surroundings and kind of watching how when I went to Edinburgh, I remember being in Scotland and looking around. If you're in that city, you look around, you see nature, 360 degrees around that city. Just beautiful, beautiful nature. And I remember saying, like, wow, they seem like they've really been able to do town and country, not urban sprawl where you take over every last patch of green. And obviously their space is limited and they have rich cultural traditions and histories that are not going to allow them to just, do that. Whereas we have a different mentality in America. But it saddens me where I have to go very far to get into something natural.
yes,
So you can go a very long time unless you've got time in your schedule to actually, have that experience.
yeah,
And I think if we can, as people who are aware that this is the creation, this is the artwork of the great artist, the more we can attune to it, seek it out, praise him for it, the more people, I think, who feel like they're on the outside, these pagans who have a heart for worship, they have a heart for nature, they have a heart for the spiritual things, they can see, oh, belief in God is not somehow at war with my love of nature. It's actually quite beautifully cohesive with it.
yeah. Well, yeah. And to come back to the reality that, again, the gospel is an ontological conversation. Like, we're talking about reality. And I think
Right.
so many people feel like foreigners because we've set faith and the spiritual and the material world as opposite.
Yeah.
And so they
Right.
go, I feel this, but the story is not that. The story is this. And I love that about this poem, right? Like, here I am in this Easter damp and chilly, but I go back and there's something of a memory there that is true,
Yeah.
right? And who knows if he's going back to his childhood in a
Right.
different location geographically and how he made that journey. But I think that recovering that ability to say, no, our religious life together, our cathedrals, our practices, the beauty of our corporate celebrations and worship. Yes, we get to say yes to those things and remember that they're nested within a God who has created, he made the first material world
Right.
and he made us in his image. So we're going to make material world. We're going to develop and build
Right.
things. And there gets to be continuity in that.
Yeah. And also just, I feel like this poem helps me to remember that common ground.
Yeah.
Wherever someone is along their journey, along their way, where they're noticing, they're having this hunger, this pull, there is this common universal longing that I think it's good to just remember. It's not you're not so foreign, actually.
Yeah.
That distance is not as far as you think.
Come on. I love that.
Yeah.
I think if that's a takeaway that everybody can take away from just this experience that's being described of to be winsome and generous with people who are seeing something beyond, right? Like everything beautiful, everything good, everything true is pointing beyond itself to the source. And so if you find or we find somebody who is onto it, right? And they're like, I don't know what it is about the perfumed flower,
But I'm going to follow that.
but I'm going to follow this. We can come alongside them and say, oh, you too. right?
Yes.
Like,
Yes.
you see meaning and significance in this. I did as well. What's beyond it? We can
Yeah.
explore those things together
Right.
versus, yelling at people, you're not looking far enough, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
you know, being generous to meet people where they're at
That's right.
is a beautiful gift. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. And we can say yes to that, right?
Right.
That intuition that says, beauty, good, true. Something's drawing me in with this perfumed power. What is it? We can celebrate that.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you see a poet who is writing in this way, that's taking you from this experience to here. One of the things that people often say to me is, well, I get lost, right? Like I don't know how to find these turns that seem to be important. Okay. So when you read a poem like this, what do you look for to pay attention to, right? That helps you kind of find your way into what might be being described there. Because in this poem, right, there's a couple particular turns. So maybe help us understand as you read poetry, what do you look for that helps you kind of understand what may be being said and get invited into it versus feeling so foreign from it?
That's good. Yeah, I think contrast is a big one. So right when you grab hold of that contrast, you're kind of lured in. You're like, ooh, this versus that. And I think that's a really kind of always an easy way to grab the essence of what the poem is heading toward. So it's like, far from this, I'm actually going to go over here. And that's exactly how it starts. So it's like, far from this traditional thing that we're doing that's damp. I have a feeling too, right? The word damp. I'm going to go over here to the ground, something earthy and simple and natural. And then it kind of takes you on that journey. I think, it opening like that, where you're aware of the contrast, can kind of help you just to start heading where he's heading. I think Billy Collins said the start of a poem is really important. He said it's like stepping into a canoe.
Yeah, there you go.
You have to get it right.
Yeah, don't get that wrong. Especially not in Florida.
No. Yeah, he said, it's very important that you give enough to where I can follow you into that canoe. I'm not lost, but you're not starting too esoteric. Billy Collins says, you can take me to Oz, but you have to start me in Kansas.
Yeah, there you go.
You don't start in Oz. And so I think poems that start in Oz make people go, huh? And next, it's too, they fell out of the canoe, And so I think that he starts it really nicely, because I'm like, far from this foreign Easter damp and chilly, my soul is actually going to go over here. So I think he does a nice job of kind of helping to be able to enter right in.
Yeah. What do you do when you get lost? Like when you go, I don't even know what this is about, because that's I'm sure happened to you. I mean, again, if you read you keep going into the really complicated world of the poets that are writing in that way, you can find yourself lost. Like you go, I don't know what is going on. Yeah.
And I got the best advice early on, which was, you don't have to like every poet.
There you go.
Find the poems that you love.
Yep.
And that might change and evolve over time, but find what you love and read that. And if I'm not saying like shy away from something hard, like do hard things, read work that challenges you, of course. But if you're just getting into poetry and follow your instincts, it's kind of like music.
Yep.
I mean, yes, the more you listen to something maybe classical, maybe the more you develop an ear for it.
Yep.
That's important if you want to set out to do that. But it's also like, what you like, and kind of just develop an enjoyment of it. Yeah. And that will lead you to more of it. Yeah. But don't feel like, gosh, this poem is so tricky and hard and awful. I guess I'm going to make myself do it. Start to enjoy it. Find the poems you like. Yeah. Allow yourself that permission, and then develop an ear and a taste for poetry, and that will maybe lead you to more complex ones. Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's so good. And not just the poems. Any art is like that. Like you're saying, you would not put a painting on your wall because you're supposed to. Right?
Exactly.
Like I hate it, but I'm supposed to like it.
People say I'm supposed to like it. So
we bring things into our home that we're like, I think it's beautiful. And you might come to my house and be like, I don't connect with that, but it moves you. And so I think that's great advice to, and again, to think with V3, we're trying to wondrously reveal Christianity and invite people to know God personally. We're doing it through art, like visual art, literature, music,
Right.
immersive experiences. There's so many different art forms. And so this year you're writing you've written a children's book,
Yep.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that will feel different than your poetry collection.
Mm-hmm.
And someone might pick this up who maybe never picked this up.
Right.
And that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But I think that goes to the poet as well, right? I know Wendy, and Wendy is important. So maybe I get exposed to her poetry, and then I get exposed to her children's book because
Mm-hmm.
I connected with her.
Yeah.
I think that's what's cool about a Harlem Renaissance poet is you go, hey, I was interested in that particular time and place, and there's people there that were curious to me.
Yes.
So I connected with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then they brought me into a world that I would have never discovered if I didn't meet them. So I think it can function both ways.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Especially now where we have more connection to story than I think we once did, and to the person writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you get to the end of this poem, just for you personally, is there a feeling that comes up? You know, sometimes you read a poem and you feel refreshed, or you feel enlivened, or you feel like there's a fresh question. When you get to the end of this and you sit back and go, an Easter flower, I feel this. What is this? What does this evoke in you?
He just takes me into his I'm yielding my heart. By the end of the poem, I'm yielding my heart to its perfumed power. I have done that, and I do that with flowers all the time. So he has me just go with him to yield my heart to its perfumed power.
Yeah.
So I go right there with him. I also think it does just this beautiful, and I a pagan, you know, this idea where we're all just where we are in our journey. I think that it just connects me with him.
Yeah.
Exactly where he is.
Yeah.
Exactly what he believes. It just connects me with him. And now I'm worshiping, I'm yielding my heart to the perfume power right along with him.
Yeah. I love that. The kindness of God leads us to repentance. That idea of if you feel very distant, very foreign from God, the idea is we're all made to worship. This posture of adoration. I said it in my book of saying adoration is the first position of the new creation. We're made for it. We're made to be drawn in and be in a posture of just adoration back to this God who made us by him and for him. That's actually what we're made for. It's what makes us most alive as creatures. And so to find a poem that reminds us of that, maybe if we've felt really foreign and distant, and so that might be you listening to this and you're like, you know what? I feel very much like outside of these experiences of worship. And yet I'm drawn to God. There's an invitation to stop right where you are, right? You don't have to go you can go right there and say, I don't know, something's drawing me. So I'm going to stop right here and find myself very foreign worshiping.
Yeah.
It's
and
beautiful.
I have a poem is in the book, Chasing the Wind, where I went after all of these things and none of them satisfied. Even great and beautiful things, beautiful flowers, beautiful relationships, beautiful art and creation and theater and things I was into, none of them were enough.
Yeah.
And so you do get to the point if you are looking for these things and you are hungry and you aren't able to respond to that enticing draw of beauty, eventually you're going to have to come to terms with, well, is that flower enough? Is that end there? Is my search over?
Yep.
Or is there something more?
Yeah. And to let them draw you. I think that's where Lewis got, where he said, if you ask too much of it, it'll break your heart. Because that thing it's not in it, it only came through it.
Yeah.
But to recognize that allows you to enjoy both.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you come with your cup is overflowing. When you come to the art or the person or the situation or the flower, your heart is hopefully already overflowing. So you're not looking to be filled in the same way from an empty cup, but an overflowing cup that just appreciates that other thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to ask you to read the poem again. We always close out just reading the poem. And again, I think that the hope in educating and bringing this art form back, if you think V3's conservatory and having a conservatory poet who curates a conversation like this, reminds us of something that it would impoverish us to forget, that we can pick up a poem and sit down in our own chair or on our own
Mhm.
porch and let a poem take us on a journey from this to that,
Yeah,
and find ourselves surprised maybe in a place that we never expected to be. And I think this does that.
I agree. Okay. The Easter Flower by Claude McKay. Far from this foreign Easter damp and chilly, my soul steals to a pear-shaped plot of ground where gleamed the lilac-tinted Easter lily, soft-scented in the air for yards around, alone without a hint of guardian leaf. Just like a fragile bell of silver rhyme, it bursts the tomb for freedom sweet and brief in the young pregnant year at Easter time. And many thought it was a sacred sign, and some called it the resurrection flower. And I, a pagan, worshipped at its shrine, yielding my heart unto its perfumed power.